The sun filtered softly through the tall pine trees as Samuel and Clara Jefferson drove their old Buick down the winding country road. Married for 52 years, this was their Sunday ritual. A slow drive to nowhere in particular, followed by coffee and pie at the same roadside diner they'd visited for decades. Clara hummed along to a gospel tune on the radio, while Samuel focused on the road, both wrapped in the comfort of routine and each other. "Look, Sam," Clara said, pointing toward a blooming field of sunflowers. "They're all facing the light. Isn't that something?" He smiled. "Just like you always have, Clara. Always finding the sun." They shared a quiet laugh. Life hadn't always been easy, but they had each other and their faith. This was a peaceful day, free from noise, city traffic, or worry. They were just two elders enjoying their golden years. But peace is fragile. As they pulled into the gravel lot of their favorite diner, a cozy spot with checkered tablecloths and hand-painted signs, the crackle of gravel, under tires behind them, snapped the spell. A police cruiser followed them in, lights off but posture aggressive. Samuel glanced in the rearview mirror. That's odd. Two officers exited the cruiser. One tall, white, mid-30s, square jaw. The other, a younger blonde woman with sunglasses perched on her head. Neither smiled. No hello, no casual question. Just intensity. "Step away from the vehicle," the male officer ordered coldly. Clara gripped Samuel's hand. "Sam, what's going on?" The gospel music stopped. So did their hearts. They had done nothing wrong. Yet in seconds, their peaceful Sunday turned into a nightmare neither of them saw coming. And the world was about to witness everything. "Is this your vehicle?" the taller officer asked, his tone firm, accusatory. Samuel blinked, confused. "Yes, sir, it's ours. Had it nearly 18 years. License and registration." Samuel reached into his coat pocket, hands deliberately slow. "Registration's at home. We weren't planning on going far. Just lunch." The female officer began circling the car, noting details aloud into her radio. "Brown Buick, license plate 6FC. Wait, it's not matching the registered description." Samuel's heart began to pound. Clara's face tightened with worry. "That can't be right," he said. The tall officer narrowed his eyes. "You expect us to believe you own this vehicle with no proof? Step aside." "We're not criminals," Clara whispered, voice trembling. The officer ignored her. "Ma'am, don't interfere," the woman snapped. Clara gasped. "Interfere? I'm standing with my husband." They began rifling through the vehicle, glove box, under seats, trunk, without a warrant or clear cause. Clara clutched her purse tightly, as if protecting the last piece of dignity she still possessed. Samuel's jaw clenched. "You're violating our rights." "Watch yourself, sir," the officer replied, stepping closer. A small crowd began gathering, diner patrons, waitresses, a teenage boy filming with his phone. "What's happening?" a woman asked. "Just a routine check," the female officer barked. But everyone knew this wasn't routine, this was targeted, unjust, based on nothing but suspicion and skin color. Inside the diner, a waitress whispered, "Someone should call someone." Outside, Clara trembled as Samuel placed a calming hand on her shoulder. She whispered, "Why is this happening, Sam?" He didn't answer. He was trying not to break. The taller officer suddenly grabbed Samuel's arm. "Where did you get this car?" Clara stepped forward, panic in her voice. "Officer, please. He bought it new from Henderson Buick in 06. It's ours." He turned sharply. "Ma'am, I said don't interfere." Samuel shook his head. "This is insane. Check our IDs. We live right down the road. We're retired schoolteachers, for God's sake." The woman officer held up an old photo found in the glove box. "Who are these kids?" "Our grandkids," Clara answered, her voice cracking. "That's Malik, and that's Rose. They made us that frame for our 40th anniversary." The officer stared a beat too long, as if doubting even that. Someone in the crowd muttered, "This is messed up." Phones were recording now. The tension was thick, and the officers were growing visibly irritated, not just by the couple's resistance, but the attention. "We're going to need to detain you both for further questioning," the man declared. "What?" Samuel and Clara both exclaimed in disbelief. "You're not under arrest yet, but we can't let you leave." Clara's knees buckled. Samuel caught her. A waitress burst from the diner door, apron fluttering. "You have no right to treat them like this." "Ma'am, back inside," the officer growled. "I know them," she snapped. "That's Mr. and Mrs. Jefferson. They've been eating here since before I was born." That moment pierced the tension, but it wouldn't stop what came next. Because justice wasn't just delayed, it had been completely denied. A black SUV pulled into the lot, its windows tinted, its tires crunching over gravel like a drum roll of destiny. Inside was David Jefferson, a decorated Marine Corps gunnery sergeant, home on leave to surprise his parents for Sunday lunch. But what he saw chilled him. Crowd, tension, 2 cops manhandling his father, his mother near collapse. David threw open the door and stepped out, broad-shouldered, posture unshakable, uniform crisp, medals glinting in the sun. A waitress gasped. "It's their son!" The female officer turned. "Sir, stay back. This doesn't concern you." David marched forward, every step thunder. "That's my father you're grabbing," he said, voice like steel. The taller cop faltered. "Who?" "Gunnery Sergeant David Jefferson, United States Marine Corps," he snapped, flashing ID. "Now you will explain what's happening to my parents." Right now. His presence shifted everything. Phones rose higher, murmurs became shouts. "Is that a Marine?" The taller officer hesitated. "There was a license mismatch. Let me stop you there," David said. "They've owned that Buick since I was in basic training. Any mismatch is your system's error, not theirs. And I just saw you attempt to detain my elderly parents, without a warrant or cause." The female officer looked rattled now. "We were following protocol." David's eyes didn't blink. "Protocol doesn't include racial profiling." Samuel stood straighter now, pride returning. Clara wiped her tears. And the crowd? Electrified. The balance had shifted. The reckoning had begun. David stepped closer to the officers, his boots firm on the gravel. "I asked you to explain," he repeated, eyes unwavering. "Not excuse." The tall officer's confidence crumbled. "Sir, we were just verifying ownership. By emptying their car, grabbing my father's arm, ignoring my mother's words." David turned toward the crowd. "Did anyone here see them do anything suspicious?" Heads shook. Voices replied, "No. They were just parking. They didn't even get their pie." David faced the officers again. "You're being watched and recorded and held accountable." Clara touched her son's arm. "David, don't get into trouble." He covered her hand gently. "Mom, you raised me to fight for what's right." The taller officer stammered, "If they can provide proof." "You never asked for it until you were halfway through the glove box," David said coldly. The silence was thick. Even the wind stilled. Finally, the woman officer muttered, "We're sorry for the confusion." David's face darkened. "That's not an apology. That's damage control." He stepped between the officers and his parents, shielding them. "A symbol, a son, a Marine. You will not touch them again." And for the first time, the officers backed away. "Let them go," someone shouted from the back. "Give them their dignity," another voice added. The crowd, once silent, found its voice. Phones streamed live. Teens narrated. Elders nodded. One woman began praying. The officers froze. David didn't move. "You owe them a public apology," he said, never raising his voice. "We were only doing our job," the taller officer replied, trying to retreat from confrontation. "No, you were doing your version of the job, on the wrong people," David said. A diner cook stepped outside with a pot of coffee, walking it over to Clara. "You all right, ma'am?" She nodded faintly. "Thank you, baby." The waitress from earlier joined them. "You don't owe anyone proof of your humanity." David turned to his father. "You okay, Pop?" Samuel's voice was hoarse. "I am now, son. Now that you're here." The taller officer looked around, the crowd growing, the situation escaping his control. "We'll leave you in peace," he said. David didn't reply. The officers returned to their cruiser, silence chasing them like guilt. The police cruiser rolled away slowly, dust swirling in its wake. Clara leaned into David, still trembling. "I thought they were going to arrest us." "I know, Mum," he whispered. "But they didn't, and they won't ever again." Samuel exhaled deeply. They didn't see a retired teacher. They saw a threat. David looked into his father's eyes. They saw wrong. The diner crowd didn't disperse immediately. People came forward, offering words, hugs, even business cards. Someone paid for their meal. Another offered to help them file a formal complaint. The cook brought out 2 plates of warm apple pie. "On the house, for real heroes." Clara smiled weakly. "I'm not a hero." David took her hand. "You are, Mom. Just for surviving this world with grace." Samuel looked at David. "You saved us today." David shook his head. "No, Pop. I just reminded them who you are." And for the first time that afternoon, Samuel smiled. But the questions lingered. Why them? Why today? What if David hadn't come? Justice had arrived, but only because it was carried on the shoulders of someone in uniform. The injustice remained, waiting for the next opportunity. Unless something changed. Later that evening, the Jeffersons sat quietly in their living room. The house was still. Clara stared at her untouched tea. Samuel sat in his recliner, eyes fixed on nothing. David stood at the window, arms crossed. They never even explained it, Clara finally said. Just license mismatch. Samuel grunted. Excuse. That's all it was. They saw two old black folks and assumed the worst. David turned. It wasn't about the car, it was about control. Clara's voice cracked. If you hadn't shown up, David sat beside her, taking her hand, then I'd be picking you up from jail, or worse. They let that sit in the air. The thought alone was terrifying. David pulled out his phone. I've already contacted the precinct. I'm filing a formal complaint. I have names, badge numbers, video, and I'm not stopping there. Samuel raised a brow. What do you mean? I've called a reporter. The story's getting out. Clara's hand tightened around his. Is that safe? David nodded. They want silence. We give them headlines. Samuel finally nodded. Then we'll speak too. David looked at his parents with pride. It's time people saw who you really are. The truth wasn't just about what happened. It was about why it happened, and it was time the world paid attention. 2 days later, the Jeffersons welcomed a local journalist into their home. Her name was Maya Torres, a young black reporter from Channel 6 with a quiet fire in her eyes. She shook Clara's hand. Thank you for trusting me. We're not doing this for attention, Samuel said. We're doing it so no one else goes through this. David stood nearby, arms folded. You'll get the facts. Unfiltered. They sat down at the dining room table. Maya set up her recorder. Let's start from the beginning. Clara walked her through the day. The sunflowers, the gospel song, the pie, then the crack of gravel, the humiliation, the fear. Samuel spoke next, his voice calm but steady. They never saw me. They only saw a stereotype. We were guilty until proven innocent. David added, this happens more than people think, but this time they picked the wrong family. Maya nodded, deeply listening. We'll run it tomorrow, prime time. People need to see this. Later, she asked if they had a family photo to share. Clara brought one out, David in uniform, Samuel in a graduation robe, Clara holding her grandkids. Maya smiled. This is the truth. This is who they need to see. The Jeffersons had stayed silent for decades, but now their voices would echo far beyond their quiet street. And the system that wronged them would have to answer. The segment aired on Wednesday night. The headline was clear: Retired black couple harassed by police. Marine son demands accountability. It went viral. Within hours, neighbors were knocking on the Jeffersons' door, offering support, flowers and tears. Strangers sent letters. Local businesses posted signs, "We stand with the Jeffersons." But not everyone was pleased. An anonymous caller hissed into the receiver, "You should have stayed quiet." Clara hung up, her hand shaking. "David," he was already dialing, "we'll get a security camera installed. I've got people." The mayor called the next morning. So did the police chief. "We're investigating," they both said. David responded coldly. "Start by suspending the officers." Protests formed outside the station. Students, elders, pastors, marching, chanting, holding signs with Clara and Samuel's faces. One said, "They raised a Marine. You raised suspicion." Samuel watched through the blinds, stunned. "I didn't know this many people cared." "They do," David said. "They just needed a reason to act." Clara sat quietly, heart heavy. "Why did it take all this? Why did it take you in uniform?" David didn't answer. Because he didn't know. Under mounting pressure, the police department held a press conference. Chief Lasky stood stiffly behind the podium. "We take these allegations seriously. An internal review is underway." Reporters pounced. "Why weren't the officers suspended?" Lasky hesitated. "They've been reassigned pending outcome. The community wasn't satisfied. Reassigned isn't accountability." Someone shouted. David stood in the back, arms crossed, watching the charade unfold. Clara and Samuel watched from home, disheartened. "They're trying to run the clock out," Clara muttered. The next day, the department released a vague statement. "All citizens deserve equal treatment. We regret the distress caused." Regret wasn't justice. David stepped up again, this time on live TV. "My parents were not distressed, they were violated. And if nothing is done, others will be too." His words spread like wildfire. Social media erupted with hashtags. Hashtag Stand with the Jeffersons and Uniform Doesn't Tear Race Color. Hashtag Justice for Clary and Sam. The department couldn't hide anymore. And David wasn't backing down. A week later, the town council convened an emergency public hearing. David spoke first, calm, precise, unshakable. "My parents are not just a story, they're your neighbors, and this isn't new. It's just the first time someone recorded it." Then Clara stood, her voice soft but firm. "I was afraid, not of the officers, but of what they saw when they looked at us, strangers, not people. Samuel added, "We taught generations of children in this town, but still, we weren't given the benefit of the doubt." The room was silent. Then came the surprise. A retired white officer, grey-haired and stiff with guilt, stepped forward. "I saw the footage," he said. "That wasn't protocol. That was prejudice. I served with the officer who did this. He knew better." The room buzzed. Suddenly, people began standing, former students, co-workers, neighbors. One by one, they echoed support. "We trust them. They raised us. They are this community." The walls that protected the officers began to crumble, and the tide began to turn. 2 weeks after the incident, the officers involved were placed on indefinite suspension. Public statements followed, one from the mayor, one from the chief, and one from the officers themselves. Finally, the male officer admitted judgment error. The female officer said she regretted her tone. David wasn't impressed. Tone didn't search the car, he told the news. But the Jeffersons weren't seeking revenge. They wanted change. Samuel proposed new training. "Let's teach officers what respect really looks like." The city council agreed. A new program was drafted, with David and Clara consulting. Schools hosted discussions, churches organized unity drives, donations poured in. Clara smiled softly. "Maybe something good can grow out of this." David agreed, but stayed guarded. "We're not done yet. This isn't victory. It's a beginning." Still, for the first time in weeks, they slept soundly, knowing they'd sparked something bigger than themselves. 1 month later, Samuel and Clara returned to the diner. Same Buick, same gravel lot, but everything felt different. The owner rushed out, grinning. "Your booth's waiting." Inside, applause broke out. Diners stood, clapping, smiling. "Welcome back." The couple blushed. 2 slices of apple pie arrived, on the house. David joined them a few minutes later, wearing civilian clothes, not a uniform. "I figured we'd finish what we started," he smiled. Clara squeezed his hand. "You gave us back our voice." Samuel nodded. "You gave them all a reason to listen." Outside, the sunflowers were blooming again, facing the light. And for the first time in a long time, the Jeffersons truly felt safe. Because this time, the world saw them, and believed them, and stood beside them. Justice hadn't erased the pain, but it had opened the door to healing. And sometimes that's where real change begins.